Nightshades. Some people can eat them and thrive, some people can't, and that's the point. What I'm going to help you identify is if you have a sensitivity to nightshades, and it's really simple to work out, but there are massive long-term health consequences, and it doesn't show up early in life. It shows up later in life. And one of the biggest things that the scientific literature now shows about nightshades in vegetables, they make this compound called alkaloids to protect the plant from being eaten. And for most people, they can get rid of these plant alkaloids, no problem at all. But for some people like me and people that I help, and quite a few of them, they don't metabolize these nightshades from vegetables, so they can destroy your gut. So that's just one problem. And when you don't have a very healthy gut there, this is now what they're showing. So if you've got a gut dysbiosis, you've got inflammation, all of those things, your gut-brain axis doesn't work. So what does that mean? Well, you're going to have anxiety, stress, depression, IBS. That's what we're talking about here with these nightshades. Cognitive decline and autism. But, benign things like memory issues, you can't think properly and brain fog, things like that. And that's starting to show up. Shouldn't be happening. Then you've got your endocrine axis, which is your hormones, right? So your hormones are all out of whack and you feel like shit. Then your heart, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, thrombosis, thick sludgy blood and hypertension, high blood pressure. Then your lungs, asthma. Then you've got sinus and all of that crap playing out. Then the liver. Now, the liver does a lot of detoxing, and paradoxically, it detoxes these alkaloids from nightshades. And if you can't do it very well, it burdens your liver. And that's not very good because you get liver inflammation and carcinoma and, really bad. And the liver detoxes estrogen. So when your estrogen gets too high, your testosterone comes back down. So absolutely huge. Then your pancreas, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Then your joints and your bones, demineralization of your bones, and you get sore joints. Then your muscles, you can have muscle pain from these things. And then as you age, sarcopenia, and you become frail. Skin axis, we're talking about acne, cirrhosis, atopic dermatitis, wrinkles. Who the hell wants to age faster with wrinkles? And your reproductive axis, that's right. Your gonads, testes for men, ovaries for women. They become dysfunctional, infertility, low testosterone, low sex hormones, kidney disease, bladder, urinary tract infections. You don't have a very good stream and you can have a bit of pain as well. So what I'm going to identify is how to fix the gut towards the end in this and how to identify if you have this issue. And one thing that I was recommended in 2018 was the Mediterranean diet. I'm going to circle back to this and why it can't work for me. Now, it is true that it will work for a lot of people and it will actually increase their longevity, but not for me. It absolutely crushes me, and I'll talk about why that is. But if you can kind of see where I'm taking this, it's nightshades, because the Mediterranean diet is full of nightshades. So some people it's going to work for and some people it certainly isn't. So let's just unpack how this all plays out. So let's just talk about the gene that's responsible for metabolizing these nightshades. So you got nightshades and insecticides, the alkaloids. You've also got organophosphates, which is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Imagine if it's burdened. All of these things start to happen. So basically, you got these things on your genes called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. And this is one here. This is my gene right there, which is the RS1799807. So mine doesn't work very efficiently. So if I eat nightshades, what shows up in my life is all of this dysfunction here. So the gut, which is huge. If you've got a sick gut, you'll be sick in every area of your life, your cognition, your muscle, everything there. Joint pains, autoimmune reactions, fatigue, mood swings, hormonal havoc, inflammation, all of that could start to show up there. So what we have to think about is if those genes are burdened because yours don't work too well, that's the problem. And we can identify this. Now, another big problem with foods you're sensitive to, it's not just nightshades, it could be other things too, is it's going to cause an uptick in inflammation. And what's really vexing to me is that when you get your labs done, I've got information below about this. I've got a PDF you can download. And the important thing about this PDF is that it's going to show you which labs to get checked and how to get them in optimal range. So an example of this is when you get your inflammation checked on a blood lab, a standard panel will say 3 and below is okay. But functional medicine says that's not close. Where it should be is below 1. So 1 and below, according to Chris Masterjohn here. When you've got those values between 1 and 3, all this starts to show up in your life, including a very sick gut. And, you've seen the information at the beginning of that, like cardiovascular disease, everything's going to start showing up. You're going to be fatigued. And guess what? Your testosterone takes a hit. So this is how your body makes testosterone through the gonadotropin releasing hormone system. And the important thing to understand is that this system has what's called a pulse generator. Every 2 to 3 hours, you should be making testosterone sex hormones. So this sends a pulse to trigger LH and FSH. LH, testosterone, FSH, spermogenesis. So if your insulin and glucose is too high, cortisol is too high, your inflammation is too high, it's largely downregulated. So you're missing out on a lot of the good stuff. So as you can see, like these SNPs here are very important to understand so you can actually understand what foods you put in your body and supplements for that matter, you will thrive with. So we'll talk about how to test that out towards the end there. Now, this is the gene in question. This is my genetic SNP for nightshades. Now, as you can see here, the BChE, which is the gene in question, and this is a SNP RS1803274. Now, this is that son of a bitch right there. Now, I'm homozygous, the CT copy right there, which means mine doesn't clear it out too well. And that causes an uptick, and you guessed it, inflammation. TNF-alpha, interleukin-6, or inflammation goes up. And the big important thing that I understood is that as we age, it just gets worse and worse. And what shows up in your life? You've got gut issues, autoimmune issues, and you're told that this diet's going to work for you. But you're blind. We've got no clue what you should be eating nutritionally until we really look at these SNPs. And it sounds complicated, and I will show you how to put this together. Now, another big issue that it causes is sleep issues. So when you've got these food sensitivities, it causes disrupted sleep. Now, if you want to, be absolutely fired up, you want to have a lot of energy, you want to have optimal testosterone, brain function, and muscle mass, and rip off the body fat, we have to sleep. It's one of the foundations. This is Matthew Walker. He's a neuroscientist, and he's just speaking to that through the research that he's conducted. Listen to this.
Not getting sufficient sleep, 70% of all the weight that you lose will come from lean muscle mass, and not fat.
Right. The body, when it's fatigued in that way, wants to hold on to those fats.
Exactly.
Right?
Your body becomes stingy in giving up its fat. Mm-hmm. So in other words, when you are underslept, but you're trying to watch your diet, watch what you eat, you will lose what you wanted to keep, which is muscle, and you will gain what you wanted to lose, which is
fat. So it can cause a lot of sleep disruption. So this has been absolutely fleshed out in the literature. Now, to make matters worse, you've got these alkaloids and other compounds in the actual foods itself, so the plants don't want you to eat them. Now, some people, not a problem with, but they've also got, back over here, they've also got these synthetic pesticides on them, like organophosphates and carbamates and these things here. And that further burdens this gene. I can't believe that, the plants have their own chemicals against this for us eating it. Some people thrive, and some people, all of these pesticide chemicals there, it just makes it exponentially worse. Still, inflammation goes up, testosterone comes down, and you feel like garbage. So these nightshade vegetables, if you've got this issue, pesticides are super bad and nightshades are super bad. So this is one of the publications, very recent one, published in 19th of May 2023. It's behind a paywall. I've actually paid for this one. I've had a good look over it. But the standouts here is that it can cause significant morbidity and mortality. And nightshade vegetables contain, these alkaloids that I've mentioned there, alkaloid chemicals. So the plants are trying to protect themselves. And again, some people can eat this stuff, not a problem, but some people can't there. And it's going to cause the toxicity to build up, inflammation goes up, and it destroys your gut. Irritable bowel syndrome. And if you recall earlier there, you've got all of these gut-brain axes, okay? And we're talking it's talking to every single organ system in your body. Now, one thing that I learned when I was doing my certificate in nutrition, and I also took an extra course with this legend here, which is Dr. Data. So if you just look at this research paper here, psychological stress, inflammatory bowel disease, and these nightshades can cause this in you, which leads to anxiety and depression-like behavior, comorbidities, neuroinflammation, chronic psychological stress. All right. And this is what Dr. Data said about that. And he was speaking about gluten here because a lot of people that we test, over 200 now, have gluten sensitivity, and it's causing the same stress as nightshades are doing also. So the same mechanism of action. Listen to this.
So inflammation in the gut activates gut immune cells. Those gut immune cells send messenger proteins to cells in the brain called neuroglia. Those neuroglia get activated, and then the brain gets inflamed. And when the brain gets inflamed, nerve conduction, synapses slow down. Inflammation in the brain slows down synapses, and patients just can't think, they can't focus, they can't get their thought process going on. So those are the things that happen with it. So basically, some people that have immune reactions to gluten, they get severe brain inflammation when they eat it. They can even have their blood-brain barrier, gut barrier breakdown. They can set up the stage for neurological autoimmunity. They can decrease blood flow to their brain. As their brain gets inflamed, their messenger synaptic pathways become slower, and they just don't function well. And they walk in the healthcare system and they get diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder or chronic anxiety disorder.
So they kind of get misdiagnosed. And for the sake of emphasis there, like I work with Dr. J, and one of the things that significantly lowers inflammation is testosterone. So this little video is just going to reiterate what I just said, but it's also going to speak to what Dr. Data said there. So listen carefully to this.
Discs in the back, it goes back to testosterone. He probably has some low back stuff, but this plus in the gene, almost everybody complains of low back pain and things.
Yep.
But it's all about testosterone to keep that at bay, to protect against future problems there. Testosterone.
How does testosterone do that?
It shuts off interleukins. And interleukins kind of like CRP. It's a form of inflammation.
Right. Okay.
And there's 24 of them. There's IL-1, there's IL-2, there's IL-3, all the way to 24. And some of them are in your knees, and some are in your elbows, and some are in your discs in your back, and some are in your brain.
Yeah.
And so like this particular one, IL-1 alpha, it's called interleukin 1 alpha. It's in your discs in your low back.
Yep.
And it can get out of hand and just cause specific low back disc degeneration and disc pain, and bulging discs and all this kind of stuff if you have inflammation there all the time, and testosterone shuts it off.
So I guess testosterone would be a very powerful lever to pull down on to get rid of inflammation when it's up at the right level.
Exactly. Yeah. In general, especially in the low back. Yeah. That's why the drug companies hate it, right? Because if you have nice high testosterone, it's going to heal a lot of chronic issues that they're prescribing drugs for, like arthritis and gut issues, like IBS. They have all these drugs for irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah.
It's just like on and on.
Testosterone. So you've actually got genes in your gut for testosterone that lowers inflammation in your gut. And this is academic. It's been shown now. So this is why we need to get optimal testosterone back. But the paradox is if you're not eating the right foods for you, it causes an uptick in inflammation. And this scientific paper right here, this was talking about people in an occupational setting, right? The workers, furniture shops, gas station, auto mechanics, carpenters, textile, electricians. So does that mean you can't be that person? Of course not. It means you need to unburden this gene and then certainly it won't have to work too hard. And then everything will start, the inflammation will come down and your brain will come back online. Your gut health will start coming back. But you really need to understand that this inflammation, she's going to shut down testosterone production, which is another double whammy because it lowers inflammation in the gut and your joints and a lot of other places too. And the paradox again is that when inflammation is chronic, it's going to keep your testosterone low. So pesticides are another big problem as well. And gut health is absolutely huge, as we've just seen there. Now, another thing that I learned when I went through my course in nutrition, they kind of analogized it to me as you got two health professionals, mainstream, and they only see two colors. You're either healthy over here in the white, good to go, or they can prescribe you drugs. And that's kind of what we see. We work with a lot of people there. In functional medicine, they look at the symptoms that you've got, and you could be all the way along here getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And by the time you get to anywhere from, say, 30 to maybe 60, they'll diagnose you and say, we found what's wrong with you, and now you can have these drugs. Now, these drugs suppress the pain and the symptoms, but all the while, it's still festering underneath. Your gut's still destroyed. You still don't feel very good, but the pain's gone away. So you think that it's working. So it's like a false sense of security. Now, this is what Dr. J also said about, the system and how they think through this problem. So you got to really think like, where are you along here? You've got brain fog, is your gut a bit sick, you got a bit of bloating, distension. So there's a lot of questions that you need to ask before you can really identify what's really wrong with you. So listen to this.
It's not thriving. It's definitely suboptimal. It's frustrating, honestly. I mean, especially on the topic of testosterone, because if your testosterone goes down, just your health in general goes down. So that opens the door to a bunch of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And so the pharma companies are very excited about keeping your testosterone down from a financial perspective.
Exactly.
As a business model, it's a good idea for them.
And this is what Dr. Ken Berry also said to me. And it was kind of shocking, but it makes a lot of sense now. Like you just heard there that, basically you're either healthy or not. And when you get to a place where you're not healthy, they'll prescribe you drugs. But all the while along here, you can actually diagnose through functional medicine and correct those issues. Very simple to do without drugs before it gets to that place. And this is what Dr. Ken Berry said about prescription medications. Now, certainly, if you need them, you should take them. But can you potentially get off them? Well, I did. I was on blood pressure, anxiety medications. I was on arthritis medications. I was on a lot of medications, and I got off all of them.
All those things are symptoms of low testosterone, and there's a long list of prescription medications that you might be taking from your doctor, your doctor that you trust, that could actually be plummeting your testosterone levels. I've got a YouTube video about medications that lower testosterone. In case any of you guys are taking a medication, you can watch that video and make.
So basically, most big pharma drugs will do that. And as you heard Dr. J say, that's kind of what the goal is, to keep your testosterone down so you can become a lifelong customer of big pharma. So in the current medical system's eyes, you're either healthy, even though you got symptoms like brain fog, gut distension, you don't feel very good, and they say that's normal. It ain't normal. And then I actually heard this on TikTok this was Shark Tank, and this is a question that the sharks asked the person. Check this out.
Joe, let me ask you a question. Why not just go license it to one of the big drug companies?
Because I did that originally. I went to one of the biggest in the United States, and they told me we were actually a competitor, and if they took the product, they would shelf it. Because why would they prevent it for $1 when they could treat it for 14?
Why would they prevent it for $1 when they can treat it for 14 and you become a lifelong customer? Well, that's their business model, as Dr. J said. So functional medicine identifies where you are along this chain here, getting close to big pharma drugs, identifies the root cause, and I've got information below about doing the first step here. This will show you the right functional professionals to work with. It's got a PDF where you can download. It shows you the right labs and how to work with these functional doctors to identify where the hell you are along here, so you can actually fix it before you get to a place where you go on those drugs, and then your testosterone will be low, and all of those issues are festering underneath. So the way that we solve this problem is, first we've got to heal the gut. And this is a very complicated system to heal the gut. It's simple, but it takes a lot of understanding. I'm going to have to do another video on that. So basically, the first line of defense, number one, oral, lung, and skin microbiome. So we have to protect ourselves. This is the first line of defense. Then digestion. So you got to eat the right foods that don't cause an uptick in inflammation, all right, genetically there. And then you've got to digest your food properly. The pancreas, the gallbladder all have to be optimized. You have to eliminate the gut destroyers and pathogens. So you can use supplements, natural supplements that are antimicrobial and antibacterial, viral, and mindset. As you'll see right here, and I'll talk about this in a moment, if you are eating because you're stressed or you're in a rush or you're emotional eating, they've shown now that that can cause the tight junctions to open up within 5 minutes of consuming that meal. Then you've got what? Systemic inflammation. And then your energy comes back down. Then 1-2 hours later, you're hungry, you're reaching for coffee and a snack to pick you up. This shouldn't happen. Like when I have my first meal of the day, I can go eat that meal and 6 hours later, I'm still going. And another thing is we have to repair the gut. So it's caused a lot of damage to the gut there. So there's supplements and compounds that you can take. We have to increase stem cell production with things like cacao powder. They've shown that increases stem cell production. Now, stem cells can turn into cells, any cell in your body, and start repairing things. So we need to uptick stem cell production. And then fasting. When you fast a little bit or 24 hours, it creates a plethora of stem cells in your gut to start healing the gut. And this goes to the final thing here, stop snacking. Because if you're eating food and you're snacking, it's very inflammatory for the gut. It can't heal itself. So what you want to do is have 2 or 3 meals a day and don't snack in between. And this is hard for a lot of people because they've got dysfunction. They've got dysglycemia, so they need to be eating sugary foods or carbohydrates all the time. They're not burning their body fat. And I'll do another video on this one here. And then what you need to do is repopulate the microbiome with the correct species. So we do GI maps, and we can identify the wrong species you've got, use the antimicrobials and antivirals and bacteria to take them out, and then increase the correct species, because you can have too many of the good species, which is bad. So we need to bring that back down into the butter zone. And then the low species, we need to repopulate those. And that's what a GI map does. And then, of course, you can do a food GI test, hemoglobin E test there, to find out what foods you're sensitive to. And this is kind of expensive, and I don't really recommend that you do this one. But the next piece of the puzzle is doing what's called a DNA test, like working out your DNA. And I'll do another video on how to do that. Now, basically, when I went through that course, it's a north to south model. You can't fix your microbiome unless you fix 1, your digestion, as I've outlined here. And then 2, your small intestines. We have to fix the tight junctions, tighten those back up. Then we have to make it very sterile in there. And I won't dive into how we achieve that at the moment. I'll do that in another video there. And of course, emotional eating. So when you are eating emotionally and you're stressed out, it inhibits your stomach from actually absorbing the foods. It releases glucose, right, when you're stress eating. So you're eating your carbohydrates, and the liver is dumping a whole bunch of extra blood glucose in the system. So your blood sugar goes way up and it comes crashing back down. So an hour, 2 hours later, you need a pick-me-up, coffee and a snack. And it inhibits your intestines from absorbing the vitamins and minerals in the food anyway. So what you want to think about is you have to have a healthy relationship with food and eat in what they call the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's rest and digest. So just to recap, what we need to think about is that when you've got these food sensitivities, like it could be nightshades, It could also be lectins, and I'll do another video on lectins. So we've done over 200 people now, and a full 65% are sensitive to lectins. Some are really sensitive, and some people have low sensitivity, and some people don't have any at all. So we're all uniquely different. Some people also have nightshade sensitivity there. But this is what nightshades can do. So this is another food sensitivity.
The lectin is the big one. That's a 4-fold higher risk of heart disease, even as a plus minus, the SELE.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So lectins are going to trigger a lot of damage to the arteries and damage to the gut. I would recommend avoiding grains.
Yeah.
You know, grains are the major source of lectins.
Yeah.
And his gut's very sensitive to grains also, with the gluten. And he's got a thyroid gene that comes up later with gluten as well. So I would say just take off the grains, you know.
So lectin's a pretty big one there, but also gluten. And over 200 people now we've done DNA testing for, and around about 90% have gluten sensitivity. And gluten's going to cause the same issue. So when we're in the rebuild method, basically, what you want to do is take off the foods that are causing this inflammation in you and destroying your gut. And then we really want to make sure that we're on path to healing the gut. Because as you can see here, I mean, it is extraordinarily important. Now, one final thing that I'll touch on is that I was recommended this Mediterranean diet by a DNA provider. So you can certainly go to a DNA provider, and they recommended I eat a Mediterranean diet. Only trouble is that when I did further testing, I am sensitive to nightshades. And in a Mediterranean diet, it's packed full of nightshades. So it's not going to work for me. Doesn't mean it can't work for someone else. But if you have a sensitivity to nightshades, the old Mediterranean diet there ain't really going to work for you. So that's how we think through this very nuanced and complicated problem. So if you got any questions, feel free to reach out to me, drop a comment below. And you know what we've got to consider is everything that you're putting in and on your body can either decrease performance or it can increase performance. And that's exactly the point. We're all uniquely different. We have genetic differences, and that's why one diet will never, ever suit every single person on the planet. It can cause stress, it can cause fatigue, it can cause anxiety, and it can destroy your gut. And the older you get, the worse it becomes. So if you got any questions or you want any more information, reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help you out.